I'm Takoda Madrona, and this is how to make a hammer pipe. This is a hammer pipe, and as you can see, there's a larger ball on the bottom, a smaller ball on top, a neck, and a mouthpiece. And this is how I first learned how to seal two pieces of glass together. This is a great exercise, and it immediately transitions into making your first water piece, as any hammer pipe can be made into a bubbler. Thank you very much, and I hope you enjoy. For today's lesson, we're going to make a hammer pipe. So a hammer pipe has a little neck, like a regular pipe, a little mouthpiece, and then it has a larger vessel on the front fused onto it. So for this lesson, we're going to do our first fusion, where we fuse two pieces of glass together, just like when we make a can. The first step in this process is we're going to make a vessel. That vessel is going to have a big bubble on the bottom and a small bubble on top. The first step is we're going to pull a neck in our section of glass. When we have a wider section of glass, pulling our neck here is going to be more important to us. Right now we're using 26mm by 4mm tubing, and when you have larger or wider tubing, it's going to be much more important to pull your neck and do this step, because that will allow you to have more defined bubbles. For today, we're just going to do a tiny pull on our 26mm, just for the practice of it and knowing the steps. The first thing that we're going to do is we're going to connect up a punty to the end of our can. And this can is about 3 or 4 inches big. The bigger you go, the bigger your hammer pipe will be. Just like any hammer pipe, it can also be a bubbler, as long as you drop a downstem into it. We are not dropping a downstem in this lesson, but you can make hammer pipes into bubblers. So you can make this vessel as large as you'd like it to be to hold that water and bubble. Today, we're aiming to make a smaller hammer pipe. So now that I have my punty attached to the end of my section of tubing, I'm going to pull a little neck. Where I connected my punty, that's actually going to be the bottom of my vessel. So I'm going to leave about 2/3 of my section untouched. And then this 1/3 section up here, I'm going to leave that untouched. And right in between them, about an inch section, I'm going to get that hot. So find an area about 2/3 the way up your can from your punty and melt that section, about 1 inch to 2 inches of glass. So I'm going to sit the flame there, right at about 2/3. I'm going to go back and forth just a little bit to cover a little bit more glass. And my goal here is we're just practicing a neck pull, just like you would with a pipe, except it's a very small version. And once that's malleable and you feel like it's evenly hot, we're going to take it out of the flame and give it a little pull. But nothing major. Come up out of the flame, see it's already tapering a little bit of itself, becomes a little bit more peanut shape. And that's it, just that tiny little bit we did there. And that's good practice for control and good practice pulling that neck. And that will also help us define our balls later on. We're going to need to have nice defined balls on this vessel. So now the next step, after we've pulled our neck, we're going to come down, we're going to detach this punty. I'm going to leave it in the flame and cut off my punty. You'll notice I'm not just perpendicular with the flame, I angled in a little bit shooting at the piece in hopes that I can cut away a little bit more of that punty without leaving a little bit of a nub of glass. I left a little bit of nub of glass. This glass is very thick, so I'm just going to rip off that glass there. I got this nub, I'm gonna rip off that glass. You can roll in the flame. Cut that guy off. Do a last little poke in. Poke, pull away, cut. You'll notice I don't use water. I actually just smack my rod right onto the bottom of my torch there. My big base of my torch is just a big chunk of metal, so I just smack it on a piece of metal. Some people will use cinder blocks or something, but you just smack the tip, and most of the tip will come flying off if there's some sort of stress there. Just like this guy, you see there's a bunch of stressed out glass in the end of this rod. I just give him a little smack on pretty much anything. It'll just come right off. So you can do that and also use water. I know everybody knows the water trick. So now we're gonna come over here. And the next step, now that we've ripped off all that extra glass, is we're gonna blow up this big ball. So now we're gonna heat up everything past our little neck we pulled. And use a bigger flame to speed up the process. I'm going to go back and forth and heat up all this glass. And we're going to blow that guy up. You can either use your blow hose or bring it to your mouth. But you're just going to get all this glass hot and blow them up. And this is just like when we made our pipe. So just like making the bowl of a pipe, we're just going to get all this glass hot. And we're going to stay perpendicular with our flame. But we're not going to stay horizontal with the table. We want to angle back a little bit in order to let that glass gather towards our blow tube. You don't want to angle forward or that hot glass is going to drip right off your blow tube. So you want to angle back, go back and forth heating all that glass, make sure that that gathers up. Now come up out of the flame, I'm going to give it a couple little puffs. I puff like a heartbeat. I don't want to over puff, so I do tiny little puffs and a bunch of them. I don't want to over expand it. So keep in control, go back to the flame, heat that guy up, get him real nice and hot. Gather, 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 give him a little puff. There we go. I'm going to do one more just to get it nice and straight and to get it just to the size I want, so I give it a little extra heat. You know what, I'm not happy with that, but mainly just the bottom. The bottom doesn't feel completely straight to me, the bottom of this ball. And now I'm going to heat that up, let that just even out a little bit. I'm a little happier with it now, and that's fine. I'm going to flatten that bottom so it doesn't need to be perfect. So there we go. I'm going to grab that guy. Got a nice big bubble there. Let me straighten that guy out a little again. Go. It's being finicky with me. There we go. So now, the next step, we're going to pop open a hole on the bottom and switch a blow tube over to the other side. So this is just like making a can. You have to attach a blow tube to the other side while you have a blow tube on the opposite side. So we're going to heat up just the tip. We're going to heat up just the tip of our ball on the very bottom. Give it a little puff. There we go. And I got a hole popped. So I'm going to attach up a blow tube. You can cap your blow tube with an earplug. You can cap your blow tube with an earplug, and that will help you be able to puff into it when you make this attachment initially. And if you're using a blow hose, that'll make this fusion real simple. You get both of them hot, get them connected, keep them in the flame a little bit to even that heat out, melt through, and take it out of the flame, keep it straight. Now you've got a blow tube attached. Now we're going to disconnect our other blow tube. If, let's say, this is all colored glass, you're going to want to kiln it after this step. You're going to want to put it in the kiln. But I'm working clear glass, so that's fine, and I'm just going to keep moving. But after that step where you connect up your blow tube to your bottom, you're going to want to kiln this whole piece before you move into working your front or your top. So now we have our bottom vessel. It's a little bit small if you're thinking about a bubbler, but it's just the right size for what we're working on today for a little hammer pipe. So now, the next step is we're going to blow up that top ball. Get a bigger flame. You're just blowing up a ball. Avoid heating your neck. You do not want to get the neck of your pipe hot right now. So get it nice and hot, give it a couple puffs, just like we would with any other pipe or any other ball. Get that nice and hot. Get that ball nice and hot. Give it a little puff. And we're making the smaller ball on the top of this vessel. Pretty gathered up now, and now I'm just going to get it to size and shape. And there we are. That's what we're looking for. We got a little bubble, we got a big bubble. The next step could be one of two things. You could either push your bowl or connect your neck. If you push your bowl first, there will be a little hole in your bowl with air escaping while you make your neck fusion. That can make a neck fusion a little bit harder to pull off. So instead of doing that, I wait and I push my bowl after I connect my neck. But either way, it's all about creating pressure inside of the piece when you're getting a seal. So as long as you have a little hole and it's just small, you should be okay. For this demonstration, I'm going to push my bowl first because a lot of people do that. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to heat up the tip of this small ball that I just blew up, and I'm going to pop a hole right in the center. So just like we've done with our pipe, and just like we did with our carb, we're going to heat up a dime size amount of glass, give it a little puff, and pop a hole. But now we can spin. So unlike with the pipes, now we can spin. So I can spin and line up in the flame. I can spin and lean against the flame, and that'll make sure that I get right in the center of the top of that ball. Now that I've got that nice and hot, I'm going to give it a little puff. If you have to bring it to your mouth, you might have to lean in the flame from above, and that'll be a little bit difficult to see, but just feel it out. But if you're using a blow hose, you can come to the side like this, give it a little puff, and it'll pop open. So now I'm going to get a slightly bigger flame, and I'm going to heat up right around this hole. Remember, as I heat, I give it a little puff to retain the hole size. So we popped that hole in the center. That's going to try to close as we heat this. So we want to puff into it a little bit as we heat it. So we heat it, heat it, heat it, give it a little puff. And that'll expand. Heat it, heat it, heat it, give it a little puff. Heat it, give it a puff. Heat it, give it a puff. Retain that wall thickness. And now, once I got it hot, just like with the pipe, once I got about a quarter size amount hot around the hole, I'm going to line up my bowl push and push my bowl in. Line up and push. You can go sideways. I was showing it vertical for the video. You can heat this guy up. And I lined up with the hole, boom. Line up with the hole, push sideways, like so. If your hole isn't perfectly straight, which mine came out pretty good, if it's not perfectly straight, you can take your tungsten or your reamer, pop it right in the hole, and give it a little push into the center. And there you go. And you get a little pushed bowl and a little hole. If there's any tool marks in your bowl, polish out the tool marks. If the bowl gets messed up in the process, re-push it. Give it a little touch. There we go. Now I've got a nice pushed bowl, nice and straight. I've got my bottom vessel, I've got my top part of my vessel. So now I've got a nice pushed bowl. I've got the bottom and the top of my vessel already. So now I'm going to pop a hole where my neck goes. So if I didn't push my bowl right now, that'd be my next step. Pop a hole right where your neck's going to go. So now that we've pushed our bowl, we're going to pop a hole in the top section at a 90-degree angle. I pick a place, 90 degrees, and we pop a hole right here, just like we would a carb. Gonna lean in the flame. We're gonna close up the hole with a reamer, lean in the flame, and give it a little puff. Just like we pop a carb. And here it comes. And she pops open. There we go. And I've got a little hole here. She popped open. And I can ream that out or puff into it to puff it out a little bit more. But I'm going to make it a little bit bigger. And now what we do is we make this hole the size of the neck that we're going to be attaching to it. Open up that hole a little bit. And just make that the size of the neck we're going to attach to it. And there we go. Now we're going to get ready to attach our neck. So now we have to make a neck for our piece. A neck for any hammer pipe is much like a pipe, except you're not going to leave any glass for your bowl. So what we're going to do is this is now our whole neck. So we're going to focus when we make a pipe, we heat up about half of the section and make that our neck and leave the other half of the section for making the bowl of the pipe. But now, this whole section is going to be our neck. So about 1/3 of our section here is going to be our mouthpiece. Just like when we worked with frit, if you have some sort of colored technique that you're using, you're going to have to melt all of that down in this process and then blow up a mouthpiece. Instead, since I'm just using clear glass, what I'm going to do is I'm just not going to heat up this 1/3 section on the back end near my blow tube. and I'm just going to pull the other 2/3 into a neck. That will leave me a mouthpiece over here. You could do the same thing with basic colored tubing you buy from a shop. The first step is we're going to connect up a punty. We get those guys fused together, get them nice and hot, get them connected, fused, and keep them straight. Once my punty cools down, I'm now going to heat up the front 2/3 section on my can. So I'm going to heat up the 2/3 of this section of glass that's closest to my punty. I'm going to heat that guy up just like we would make a pipe. And we go back and forth using our typewriter motion. Back and forth, all the way up to the right, all the way down to the left. Keeping in mind that the center of our flame, or the middle of the flame, is the hottest part of the flame. You got to make sure that that center bit of the flame gets all the way up to the right hand side and all the way down to the left hand side. Try not to get your punty too hot, otherwise you're going to accidentally rip off your punty. So we go back and forth, and you'll notice it's already condensing. It's already getting much smaller. And that's it. That's the glass condensing and getting thicker. I'm not pulling. And now once it's all hot and it's condensed up, getting nice and hot, evenly hot, I'm going to take it out of the flame. And I'm going to give it a nice little pull, nice and slow. Give it a little pull. And we just want to create a nice straight pull, a nice cylinder. And keep spinning, keep pulling, keep spinning, keep pulling. My mouthpiece section there ended up a little bit bigger than I anticipated. So we're going to go in there and we're going to blow it up just My mouthpiece section ended up a little bit longer than I anticipated. So I'm actually going to go down there and I'm going to blow it up just a little bit. And that will define that bubble and knowing where my mouthpiece bubble really will be. This is the exact same thing we did in the frit pipe making tutorial. Get this all hot. We're going to give it a little puff. Now it'll give us a little defined ball. And then when we mouthpiece our section, we can mouthpiece it right up to that ball. And we'll know where our mouthpiece ends and begins. So now the next step, once we've pulled our neck, we're going to disconnect our punty. We're going to cut off our punty here, rip that guy off. And now, you might have a little extra nub on there. We're going to thin that out. We're going to heat up the end, the tip of this little neck that we have here. We're going to attach and pull away that glass, thinning it out. We'll do that a couple times if needed, but we're going to thin that guy out. Now that that guy's nice and thin on the end, we're going to pop him open. We're going to puff in the flame and pop him open. And there we go. I popped open a hole. Now that hole is going to connect to our pipe that we just made, or the vessel. This hole will be attached to the vessel. So I heat up this hole and I'm going to use a reamer to make sure that that hole I just puffed open is the same size as the tubing that I just made, or even the same size as the hole I made on the vessel. There we go. So here's my reamer, made a nice hole, and that's going to be connected to my pipe. There we go. The next step is that we're going to connect these two sections of glass together, just like so. I'd say it's best to do this with a blow hose, but you can do it with just your mouth. Now what we're going to do is we're going to get both sections nice and hot. They don't have to be right next to each other in the flame, otherwise you might accidentally bump them into each other, and you don't want that. So you can spread them apart a little bit, and you're going to find a position that works for you that covers the most surface area. So you see I'm kind of going upside down, and then upside down with this guy. I'm going right side up, upside down with this guy, back and forth. That's covering that lip of that section. And with this guy, just like a classic section of glass, I can just spin it in the flame, and that will get it nice and hot. But I'm going to get these both nice and hot for a connection and get them molten. You want them lit up real hot. A glass blower I met when I first started glass blowing, his name was Moondog, he said, if you think you got it hot enough, get it hotter. And he's right, and he's very right. If you think you haven't got it hot enough, get it hotter. And he was right. So now I'm going to get both these guys really, really hot. And then I'm going to angle myself in the flame and connect and exit the flame and pull. You want to get a little bit of a pull to it when you exit that flame, because when you initially touch, you are going to squish just a little bit, and you don't want that glass all squished in. Once you connect and you get that pull, make sure that it's 90 degrees and check it at all angles to make sure that it's straight. And there we go. And your goal is to get most of the fusion on your first shot. But you might not do that. Glass might get bunched. You might have stress on it. So now what we're going to do is we're going to fuse it even better now that it's already together. If it is not straight to begin with, you can always warm it in the flame on both sides and then straighten it. You don't want to get it molten, you just want to warm it up to the point where you can move it and then straighten her out. Get it nice and straight at all angles. Look down the barrel of your gun, look at it at 90 degrees, and there we go. And that's what I want. I want my 90-degree neck attached to my spoon. So some people use what's called a bridge for this step. It's where you make a little solid bridge of glass from one part of your piece to the other part of your piece. That will hold your piece together while you heat a fusion. I don't use bridges all the time. What I do is sometimes I'll bridge it using the north, south, east method. So if I heat the top here, this part, and this part will stay cold. This whole bottom of this circle will stay cold, and that will hold this together pretty well if I just heat up here. But the issue is you're not gonna you're going to get it real hot no matter what in such a small area. And you can also get a much better fusion if you get a nice bridge in there, because you can get it all evenly hot. And you don't have to work it so hard to make it as even. So what we're going to do is, now that we've got our seal fused, we're going to disconnect our blow tube at the bottom of our vessel. Okay. So if we're going to connect to so the next step is that you can either north, south, east, west melt in your seal here, or you can connect to a bridge. So we're going to come down here. We are going to connect up a bridge for this lesson. You're going to come down here and you're going to disconnect your blow tube that was attached to your main vessel. I've disconnected my blow tube, and I like to collect a little bit of glass in the end of that blow tube. And that's where my bridge is going to connect to. Depending on the weight of your piece, You can use something about 5mm or 8mm as a bridge. Depending on the size and weight of your piece, you're going to want to use different thicknesses for your bridges. For this piece, I'm going to use 5mm, I believe. So I'm going to attach up this section of 5mm glass to the bottom of my vessel where I just disconnected my blow tube. Now I'm going to heat it So the first thing you're going to do is I like to add a little nub of glass right above. The first thing I'm going to do is I like to add a little nub of glass right to my blow tube. You want to be at least an inch or so away from your actual piece. But you want to add a little nub of glass there. And that's where my bridge is going to connect. So now I'm going to connect a piece of glass, 5mm, to the bottom of the vessel that I just ripped the blow tube off of. And when that's nice and hot and connected, you're then going to heat it up and bend it down to your little nub that you have there. Just like so. So I bend that down to the nub, and while it's still malleable, I get it to the nub and get them to attach to each other. And then as my rod becomes malleable when I attach it to the nub, I bend it and take it away. Just like so. See, I bend it off, and now I'm going to rip off this little punty. There we go. And now I'm bridged. And that should hold my piece when I go into it again and fuse that seal. Because I'm using clear glass, I'm going to go right back into my piece. But if I was using colored glass or something a little more susceptible to breaking, I would put it in the kiln first. So if you bridge something, put it in the kiln, then go back to it and work it. My next step after bridging is I'm going to go right around where I fused this and get it nice and hot and make sure that I get rid of all stress marks or extra thick glass. So I get that nice and hot, give it a little puff. And because I have a bridge connected to it, I can heat up all the way around it and it shouldn't move. Don't get your bridge hot, otherwise your whole piece is going to drip away and move. So I'm getting that nice and hot, giving it a little puff. Avoid hitting your bridge and give it a little puff. It's looking pretty good. There we go, and that's sealed up. And the bottom, or I believe the top, has a little something up here. I don't like that it's not evenly flowing, so I'm going to give it a little polish up there. Little extra puff, and that's flowing a little bit better. Sometimes you're going to have that, and things aren't going to look quite right. Going to give them a little extra heat. Boom, boom. And there we go. And that's my hammer pipe, except now I got a bridge attached to it, and I still got to flatten them, carb them, do all this stuff. Alright, so now let's detach our bridge. So there's a couple different ways. You could use scissors to do this. You could use pliers, tweezers to rip off a little bit of glass. I'm just going to use a little piece of glass to rip the glass. What I'm going to do is go up here near where I have my initial nub that I attached to my blow tube. I'm going to heat that up. And I'm going to rip off that glass here. Attach, pull it away. And see, I just ripped the glass away from the bridge there. Nothing else changed, but right there, glass is missing. So now sometimes it can be good to have tweezers or pliers for this part to grab a hold. But what I'm going to do is heat up the other side where I originally attached my bridge, and when it gets hot, it'll move away and come off my piece. I'm going to grab a hold and rip that guy off with some tweezers or pliers. Boom. No more bridge. Now the next step, again, I would probably kiln this if you're messing around with a bridge and everything and you haven't touched your piece in a while. I would kiln this. So rip off your bridge, kiln it, then go back to it. But the next step that I do is I'm going to heat up this little extra nub that I have on the bottom here from when I ripped off my blow tube, and I'm going to rip that guy off. Notice I can't get a nice spin on it because my piece is oddly shaped. So instead, I can get kind of a torque, this weird little turnaround that I'm doing with my arm to go around the section a little bit, or just kind of get one side, flip, get the other side, and just make sure you're getting that whole bottom nub hot. Now that it's hot, I'll grab a hold of it and rip it off. And I could have done the little twist of the motion, so you'll get this nice and hot, and so you'll attach and roll and take glass with you. Or you can do what you saw me do, which is I kind of just scooped that big chunk off because it was kind of a funky looking chunk. It was kind of cold, it was weird. I just scooped it off, got rid of the masses. And then if you got some fine detail stuff, you can tap to it, pull away, let the flame cut it, detach. And there we go. I got rid of all that, and now my next step is I got to flatten it. So now, just like flattening a pipe, you can go directly at the bottom and kind of go around in a circle like you're tracing around the bottom of your piece. Or you can sit it in the flame. I like to just line up right above the pipe, or I like to line the pipe up right above the flame and just have it sit in the flame. And if it's big, I go back and forth a little bit. But you can get a nice direct hit right here, right around the bottom of this guy, and then flip, because what's going to happen is this guy is going to have a lot of glass on the bottom of it, getting really hot, and that likes to drip with gravity. So if you're heating this thing the same way every time, holding it with the same hand, it's going to drip on you. So you want to switch hands every so often so the gravity evens out that glass. And there we go. I just heated up the bottom of that guy nice and thick. You can give it a little puff to retain wall thickness, but we're going to go sit them now. So we're going to get this guy nice and hot, and we're going to sit him on this big piece of graphite that I have over here. But for the sake of the video, I'm actually going to sit this on my paddle. Now as I do this, I like to get the glass to drip forward a little bit, and that will help with the general shaping of the piece. So as I'm heating the bottom here, you can actually just let it drip forward by pulling, and you can let it drip forward by hanging it by its mouthpiece. And then give it a little puff, retain wall thickness, keep melting, and now it's nice and hot. So I'm going to come over here, and just for the sake of the video, I'm using this as my pad. Take my mouthpiece, touch mouthpiece first, and sit. There we go. And I'm going to do that one more time because I didn't get that exactly as I wanted. I want to bring down my mouthpiece a little bit farther onto the graphite, and I want to get this a little bit more flat. So I just heat this again. Now I'm going to line my mouthpiece up right where I want it. There we go. And then flatten. And get a nice sit. There we go. Beautiful. And there we go. And now the last step is we got to pop our carb. So I'm going to take this reamer here, pop them in the hole, lean it in the flame just like we do with any carb, but I like to flip it up over this way if you got your bubbler. So we got pop that in there, lean in the flame. Woo! Just find a position that works best for you. This position works for me if I don't have a blow hose. But I'm holding the hole closed with my reamer, leaning in the flame, just like we've done with other carbs. We lean in the flame and get a dime size amount hot, and we give it a little puff. And I'm popping my carb in the top of my vessel, right next to where I connected my neck, either 90 degrees from my neck or a little bit farther in, more acute. Heat this up, give it a little puff. Pop the hole, but if I want it a little bit bigger, lean it in the flame, get it hot, tough puff. There we go. Got my carb. And that's a pipe. So I'm going to throw this in the kiln. And then we'll mouthpiece. Alright, so now we're going to mouthpiece our piece. And like I've mentioned, you can either use a finishing tool or you can use claw grabbers. Claw grabbers are not going to work for every piece. As you can see, if I claw grab this guy from the bottom, I can't exactly spin him, so what's the point of using them for that? But what's interesting about the hammer pipe is just that it has this smaller bowl on top. So interestingly enough, I can actually claw grab right around it if I've got the right size claw grabbers. Claw grab right up to the bowl, and you can mouthpiece it just like a regular pipe. And unlike a lot of pieces, that makes this really easy. But if you need to, and you only have a finishing tool, you're going to grab up a hold of it sideways, and you're going to try to get your spin by just flipping around a little bit. And when we make other pieces more elaborate, and I use a finishing tool, I'll cover that in more detail. But for now, I have my claw grabbers. We're going to claw grab right up to the top, just like we would any regular pipe. Make sure that that's nice and tight. And now what we're going to do is we're going to drop down and cut off our blow tube. So the first step is cutting off our blow tube. But we've got all this extra glass here. If you have a lot of extra glass, you can actually sit the center of the flame on that extra glass where you want it to cut. And you can sometimes get a little extra glass to come with you in this process. But a lot of the time your blow tube is really thin, so your blow tube's just but a lot of the time your blow tube's going to be thinner than your extra glass, so your blow tube's just going to want to rip away anyway. That's fine. Let that rip away. We're going to put the blow tube to the side. We're going to take a little piece of trash glass or a punty, and now I've got a little more extra glass here than we regularly do. Sometimes we have a little extra glass there, and we rip it away. And that's what we're going to do here as well. We're just going to have a little more glass than we're used to. So I'm going to gather up all this glass, get them nice and hot, spinning, gathering them up. And you can stay pretty horizontal to the table. You can even angle forward if you want. You're trying to get rid of all this nasty glass. You don't have to really gather it up like so as much as you can, but you just want to gather up that glass, and we get the last little bit of this glass nice and hot. And then we're going to attach up to it just barely. We're going to come up out of the flame, just barely tap to it, and pull away, creating a tiny little stringer. And that will pull and spin and pull and spin, and as you pull and spin, it's going to retain wall thickness and create a little point. And that's what I call a little elf hat. Now that I have that little elf hat, I'm going to melt down the tip of my elf hat just to the point where it's lit up the size of the hole I want. So I melt down that little elf hat. You see it gets nice and hot. I attach to it and pull away. And what that's doing is it's thinning out the elf hat. So I melt that down, and the elf hat is in the center, or where my mouthpiece is, so I want that to be thinned out. So I melt down my elf hat, and I make this little point, poke, pull, and that's a real thin elf hat. So detach, and now I've got a really, really thin elf hat, or a really, really thin mouthpiece, while everything else has retained wall thickness because I didn't get it hot. Now we're going to go back to my other trick where you can heat up the tip of your blow tube, and you're going to get that white hot, and then we're going to tap the end of the blow tube around this elf hat. So we're actually going to wrap it down on top of it. So we take that hot blow tube, wrap it down on the L-fat, spin to make sure everything's straight. Notice how I turn my blow tube just a little bit. See how my blow tube's not straight? That's because the section of glass that I had on the tip kind of wonked away. But what I wanted was it to flatten or squish to my mouthpiece nice and flat. So there we go, it's squished to my mouthpiece nice and flat. Wiggle it, and that'll make a perfect little hole on the tip of your piece. I like to give it a little puff, just to make sure there's no little tiny pieces of glass there that broke off, little tiny flecks of glass, because when you snap the blow tube off, you are breaking glass technically, and there can be little microscopic pieces of glass there you don't see. So I give it a little puff, and then I drop it in the flame, and that'll light up that mouthpiece and polish off that mouthpiece. Just like I said, we cracked the glass, so we actually want to polish that down nice and smooth. And there we go, we got a nice mouthpiece there. We got a mouthpiece, we got a carb, we got a pipe. That's good to go. Let's keep this in the kiln. Grab a hold of something, tweezers, anything of the like. And there we are. That's our hammer pipe. I hope you enjoyed, and thank you for watching.